Hey guys, the medieval era is a very dark period in history. In this video, we will see the most absurd rules of the medieval era, the forbidden game, when tennis was only for the elite. Imagine a dusty village square in 14th century England. The sun beats down as a group of young men, calloused hands gripping makeshift rackets, bat a leather ball back and forth. Laughter erupts as one of them makes a wild swing, sending the ball soaring over a thatched roof. But before they can retrieve it, the sharp voice of the local magistrate cuts through the air. Enough! You lot have work to do. Or have you forgotten that tennis is not for the likes of you? The players freeze. A moment later, the game is over. Not because of a lost ball, but because the law forbids them from playing at all. Yes, in 1385, tennis was officially banned for non-nobles. The reasoning? It was said to be a distraction, a frivolous pastime that lured workers away from their duties. Lords and lawmakers feared that if commoners spent too much time swinging rackets, they might neglect their trades, their farms, and, heaven forbid, their obedience to the upper class. But let's be honest, this wasn't just about productivity, it was about control. Tennis had started as a game played within modest monasteries, evolving into a favorite pastime among royalty and nobility. Kings and dukes saw it as a refined intellectual sport, one of strategy and skill. But when the lower classes began picking it up, the ruling elite saw a problem. Their exclusive game was no longer so exclusive. And so the law came down like a hammer. Only the privileged could play. If a blacksmith or a farmer was caught with a racket, he could be fined or even punished. The message was clear. Tennis belonged to the elite, and the commoners had no place in it. Ironically, banning the sport from the lower classes only made it more desirable. What better way to prove one's status than by playing a game that was literally off limits to most of society? Over time, this association between tennis and the aristocracy grew stronger, and even after the law faded, the stigma remained. Fast forward centuries later, and tennis is still seen as a sport of privilege. The luxurious country clubs, the crisp white uniforms, the high-profile tournaments, all echoes of a medieval decree that once declared, "This game is not for you." Little did they know, that same forbidden game would one day become one of the most celebrated sports in the world. The cures that could kill, medieval medicine's strangest remedies. Picture this. You're a peasant in the Middle Ages and you wake up com uma dor de cabeça latejante. Maybe it's just stress from working the fields all day. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the first sign of the plague. Terrified, you rush to the village healer, hoping for a miracle. She nods sagely, rummages through her collection of medicinal ingredients, and hands you a clay cup filled with warm horse urine. Drink it all, my dear. It'll flush the evil humors from your body. You stare at the cup. The smell alone is enough to make your stomach churn. But what choice do you have? This medieval medicine. And science? Well, science is still centuries away. The Middle Ages were a time of wild medical theories and even wilder cures. Without a proper understanding of germs or infections, doctors relied on a mix of superstition, guesswork, and sheer madness to treat their patients. And some of their remedies? Downright horrifying. Poop, the ultimate medicine. Let's talk about excrement. Yes, medieval healers believed that animal dung had incredible healing properties. Have a deep wound? Pack it with pig manure. Feeling under the weather? A concoction of dog feces and honey might do the trick. And if you were really desperate, goose droppings mixed with wine could be applied directly to the skin. Of course, in reality, these treatments did more harm than good. Instead of healing, the bacteria in the feces often led to horrific infections, gangrene, and, well, death. But hey, at least they tried. Right? Urine, the medieval wonder drug. Drinking urine wasn't just a bizarre dare. It was an actual medical treatment. Physicians claimed it could cleanse the body, balance the humors, and even cure internal ailments. Some medieval doctors would taste a patient's urine to diagnose illnesses, as if smelling it wasn't bad enough. And if you had an eye infection, no problem. Just rinse it with fresh human pee. Dead animals, leeches, and bloodletting. If drinking pee and rubbing dung on your wounds wasn't enough, medieval medicine also encouraged the use of dead animals. People believed that tying a dead mouse to a wound would speed up healing. Suffering from a sore throat? A roasted toad tied around the neck was the go-to remedy. Then there were leeches, those slimy little vampires that doctors swore could remove bad blood from the body. Bloodletting in general was a favorite cure for everything from fevers to depression, except instead of helping, it often left patients weaker, dizzy, and sometimes completely drained. The madness behind the medicine. The truth is, most medieval remedies were based on superstition rather than science. The lack of proper medical knowledge meant that people would try anything, even if it involved feces, urine, or dead rodents, to survive. And yet, despite all the absurdity, some medieval practices did lead to real medical discoveries. The use of herbs, the importance of hygiene, eventually, and even some early surgical techniques all laid the groundwork for modern medicine. Still, the next time you complain about taking a bitter pill, just remember, at least no one is making you drink horse urine or rub pig poop on your wounds. Imagine living in the Middle Ages, a time of hardship where food is scarce and luck isn't always on your side. After days with nothing in your stomach, you spot a forgotten slice of bread at a merchant's stall. Your stomach growls, your hands tremble, and without thinking much, you grab the bread and devour it in an instant. But before you can leave, a loud cry echoes, "Thief!" Within moments, you're surrounded by a crowd and dragged to the town square. The judge doesn't hesitate. Stealing is a serious crime, and the punishment will be severe. Medieval justice had no middle ground. Punishments were often extremely harsh, meant to set an example for others. Today, minor offenses might lead to fines or community service, but back then, even a small mistake could result in physical punishment or public humiliation. Public punishments and humiliation. For lesser offenses, such as deception, disobedience, or even spreading gossip, punishment often involved public humiliation. The convicted person could be tied up in the town square for all to see and mock, sometimes enduring a few lashes as well. However, the worst part was the lasting damage to their reputation. A single mistake could leave someone socially condemned for life. In some cases, authorities would brand the criminal's skin with a symbol representing their crime. This way, everyone would know what they had done, making it even harder for them to reintegrate into society. Extreme punishments. For more serious crimes, the penalties were even harsher. Depending on the verdict, a person could lose a hand, their tongue, or face even more severe consequences. Executions were also major public events, drawing large crowds. Justice or fear? The goal of these punishments wasn't just to punish the guilty, but to strike fear into anyone considering a similar crime. The idea was that fear would maintain order. However, history shows that many innocent people were punished unjustly, whether due to false accusations, personal rivalries, or simple misunderstandings. In the end, the Middle Ages leave us with an important reflection. When justice becomes purely a tool of fear, anyone can become its victim. The fear of water, when avoiding baths was a survival strategy. Imagine walking through a bustling medieval city. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat, fresh bread, and unwashed bodies. People shuffle past in heavy layers of clothing, sweat clinging to their skin, but no one seems to mind. After all, in this era, bathing was not just rare, it was considered dangerous. Yes, you read that right. Many people in the Middle Ages believed that water could make you sick. Instead of washing away germs, which they didn't even know existed, they thought that baths opened the pores, making the body vulnerable to disease. So, what was the solution? Avoid bathing as much as possible. Baths? Only for the brave or the rich. Public bathhouses once flourished in medieval Europe, a tradition inherited from the Romans. People gathered to soak, socialize, and even conduct business while submerged in warm water. But as plagues and epidemics ravaged cities, paranoia set in. Doctors and church leaders began warning against bathing, claiming that water could carry sickness straight into the body. Some even argued that dirt itself formed a protective barrier against disease. The result? People simply stopped washing. The wealthy still bathed occasionally, but only in special circumstances. Some took sponge baths with rose water, while others relied on their servants to clean their faces and hands. Full body immersion? Practically unheard of. Perfume, the medieval deodorant. Of course, avoiding baths didn't mean people stopped smelling. With time, the stench of unwashed bodies became impossible to ignore. The solution? Perfume. Lots of it. The nobility drenched themselves in lavender, rose, and citrus oils, believing that strong scents could ward off disease or at least hide their own body odor. Gloves were soaked in perfume, and streets were often sprinkled with fragrant herbs to mask the overwhelming stench of daily life. For those who couldn't afford perfume, there were other tricks, like stuffing herbs inside clothing or wearing pomanders, small decorative balls filled with aromatic spices. The idea was simple. If you couldn't be clean, at least you could smell like you were. The impact of poor hygiene. As you might guess, avoiding baths didn't exactly help public health. Filth piled up in homes and streets, lice and fleas thrived, and disease spread like wildfire. The Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in history, was carried by fleas on rats, and in a world where people avoided washing, rats were everywhere. Ironically, the medieval belief that water caused illness made people even more vulnerable to disease. Without proper hygiene, infections ran rampant, wounds festered, and simple ailments became deadly. When did people start bathing again? By the Renaissance, attitudes toward bathing slowly began to change. Advances in medicine and sanitation helped people realize that cleanliness was linked to good health. But it wasn't until the 19th century, with the discovery of germs and modern plumbing, that bathing became an everyday practice. So the next time you step into a warm shower, just remember, there was a time when people thought that skipping a bath was the key to staying healthy. And while medieval perfumes may have smelled nice, nothing beats actual soap and water, the curse of the black cat, when superstition became deadly. Picture this. It's a cold medieval night. A lone black cat slinks through the shadows, its glowing eyes catching the flickering light of a torch. A villager spots it, gasps, and immediately makes the sign of the cross. To them, this isn't just an animal. It's a bad omen, a servant of darkness, maybe even a witch in disguise. Yes, in the Middle Ages, black cats weren't just unlucky, they were hunted. People believed these mysterious creatures had connections to sorcery, demons, and the devil himself. And that belief led to centuries of persecution, both for the cats and for those who cared for them. Black cats and witchcraft, a deadly association. The fear of black cats wasn't always universal. In ancient Egypt, they were sacred creatures, symbols of luck and protection. But by medieval times, Christian Europe saw them very differently. Rumors spread that witches could transform into black cats to move unseen at night. Some even believed that cats were demons in disguise, spying for the devil. This superstition took root so deeply that anyone caught feeding or caring for a black cat risked being accused of witchcraft themselves. The Great Cat Massacres. As paranoia about witches grew, black cats became targets of mass killings. Villagers would capture and burn them alive, believing this would ward off evil. In some places, people would throw cats from towers or set them on fire in public squares, horrific spectacles fueled by fear and ignorance. But here's the cruel irony. By killing cats, people made their own lives worse. With fewer cats around, rat populations exploded. And with rats came fleas, the very fleas that spread the Black Death. Some historians believe that the mass killing of cats may have helped the plague spread faster, leading to millions of deaths, a fear that lasted for centuries. Even after the Middle Ages, the superstition surrounding black cats remained strong. Sailors believed that a black cat on board could bring either fortune or disaster, depending on how it was treated. In Europe and colonial America, black cats were still seen as omens of bad luck, and some people refused to cross paths with them. Over time, however, the world's view of these felines began to shift. In some cultures, black cats became symbols of protection and prosperity again. Today, many believe that a black cat crossing your path is actually a sign of good luck. But deep down, traces of the old superstition still linger. Even today, black cats are the least adopted animals in shelters, and some still associate them with mystery and misfortune. From fear to fortune? It's incredible how something as innocent as a cat could be feared, hunted, and even blamed for human misfortune. But history is full of examples of how ignorance and superstition can lead to cruelty. So next time you see a black cat, maybe don't make the sign of the cross. Instead, give it a little nod, because after centuries of bad press, it deserves some good luck for a change. When animals stood trial, the strangest court cases in history. Imagine this. A grand courtroom in medieval France. A judge sits high on his bench, surrounded by clerks, lawyers, and a murmuring crowd. The accused? A group of rats. Yes, actual rats, charged with devouring crops and causing famine. The court crier calls for the defendants, but unsurprisingly, none appear. The judge sighs. The lawyer defending the rats stands and makes an argument that will go down in history. My clients would gladly be here today, Your Honor, but they fear for their lives. The roads are filled with cats, and they dare not risk the journey. Welcome to the bizarre world of medieval animal trials, where pigs, dogs, insects, and even dolphins could find themselves facing human justice. A justice system for beasts. It may sound absurd today, but in the Middle Ages, people believed animals could be held legally accountable for their actions. If an animal damaged property, injured someone, or even sinned, it could be arrested, tried, and sentenced, just like a human. These trials followed proper legal procedures. The accused was given a defense attorney, and witnesses were called to testify. Some trials lasted weeks or even months, with bishops, nobles, and entire villages involved. The belief was simple: if an animal had committed a crime, it had to answer for it. Some of the strangest cases. The case of the rats, 1476, France. Accused of destroying crops, the rats were summoned to court but never showed up. Their lawyer cleverly argued that they had a right to safety and couldn't be expected to travel through dangerous terrain. The case was eventually dropped. The pig who murdered a child, 1386, France. A pig was found guilty of killing a small boy and was dressed in human clothes before being publicly hanged. In some cases, pigs were even whipped or burned at the stake like human criminals. Locusts and weevils on trial, 1500s, Italy and France. Farmers, desperate to protect their crops, sued insects for eating their fields. In some cases, the insects were officially excommunicated by the church, as if that would drive them away. A rooster sentenced for witchcraft, 1474, Switzerland. A rooster was put on trial for laying an egg, a sign, they believed, that it was possessed by the devil. The unfortunate bird was burned at the stake. Why did this happen? To us, these cases seem ridiculous, but medieval people saw them differently. They lived in a world where law and religion were deeply connected. If animals could be sacrificed in religious rituals, surely they could also be punished for breaking the rules. Additionally, these trials often served as a warning to the public. A pig being executed for harming a child wasn't just about justice. It was a way to remind people to watch their animals and control them. The end of animal trials. By the 18th century, these cases became less common as the world embraced science and reason. But traces of this medieval mindset still linger. Even today, dogs can be put down for attacking humans, and animals in zoos or circuses sometimes face punishment for misbehaving. So, next time you see a cat knocking something off a table with zero remorse, just be glad we no longer put animals on trial. If we did, courts would be flooded with cases of guilty-looking dogs, sneaky raccoons, and very, very suspicious birds.